Hello, welcome to a very special ASMR Game of Thrones podcast. I can't decide yet if I want to make this a Game of Thrones exclusive podcast or if I want to switch up whether this is a podcast that can cover a wide range of subjects. I have many different interests, including gaming, history, geography, science, philosophy, psychology. I have many things that I'm into. So, this episode may be the beginning of a Game of Thrones podcast, or it may be the beginning of a wide-ranging podcast, wide variety. So whatever shape this podcast makes, I hope it can be relaxing for you. I'm going to be doing this in soft-spoken voice. Kind of had a revelation recently with the help of some comments that my soft-spoken voice is kind of better than my whispering. I think just because the volume of it is a lot better. So, we're going to try to do some more soft-spoken videos in the future. So, in the background of this podcast, I will be having clips from Season 7, and we will be discussing the whole season. This is going to be a very long review, so sit tight and be aware that this is just my opinion. If you're watching this just because you wanted to watch a Game of Thrones podcast and you're wondering why I'm talking so quietly, it's because I'm trying to create a relaxing atmosphere. And you can do some research on ASMR on your own if you'd like to. But Season 7, overall, I really liked it. If I were to rate it in comparison to the other seasons, I would probably have to rate it as one of the lower seasons as far as story goes. As far as visuals, it ranks right at the top. I think it was visually astounding. Really, really great season to just watch and see all the battles and the the White Walker stuff and the dragons. It was really a big spectacle. That being said, the story of this season was a little disappointing for me. Now, that comes with a lot of weight, and the main reason I say that is because this is a show, a phenomenon, with lots of viewers. Lots of people read the books. The books have been around since the early 90s, so people have been waiting for this. For a long time, people want to know how this epic story is going to end. Its epic nature, I think, has been part of why it's been so successful. Its complexity, but at the same time, I think it's kind of put it at a disadvantage because now the ending has to be fitting for all of the things that have preceded it. So, because this was a short season, and in general, TV and movies cannot portray stories in as much depth as books, at least for the most part. I feel like there's a lot that was left out, and that was my biggest complain about the season, the whole thing felt extremely rushed. Whereas in seasons past, especially if you look at seasons 1, 2, and 3 in particular, you could say 4 too. But I think 1, 2, 3, there was a preciseness to it, and that comes straight from George R. R. Martin, the author of the books. There is a preciseness in the storytelling, in the minor details of the dialogue, which adds so much depth to the characters. It also expands your imagery of what the world might be like. You know, maybe there's a scene where someone's eating, a certain type of food, and you can kind of, it just helps you create this complete image of what the world of Game of Thrones is like, and those small details are actually extremely important to the show. Now, of course, there can be these big set pieces and action scenes, and those are wonderful. Those are really fun to watch, and season 7 was not without those scenes, for sure. But the season was quite short on character driven dialogue, and just transitions. As far as transitioning from scene to scene, because it's such a complex storyline, transitions can be hard, because you may be in Winterfell and you're following one storyline, then it cuts to Daenerys, and she's over in the east and in the desert, and it can be confusing. But that's why the small details can, just accommodate you to what you're watching, help you build an understanding of what you're watching. Now in season 7, the small details are few and far between. It's the season is very much, all right, we got a story to tell, we need to tell it, let's go. And the first episode was a pretty good exposition. They got good scenes out of the way, big reveal, well, not reveal, but a big completion of Arya, destroying the Freys, as we just saw. And you just get a reintroduction to all the storylines, which was great. As the season went on, though, you're seeing a lot more rushing of the story, which I think hurt a lot. There is one episode in particular, I think it is called The Queen's Justice, and it's one where Tyrion plans to attack Casterly Rock, expects that Jaime and Cersei will not be thinking about it, and they cut over, and the whole scene is kind of cut in a montage that leaves out the action. There's basically no action. There's a little bit of action in that montage, but it basically cuts out everything, and then you're left at the end of it where Jaime goes to talk to Lady Olenna, and you're just kind of left without a lot of information. Not only that, but the Unsullied, they left, and then all of a sudden we're just at Casterly Rock. There was no transition, scenes, storylines just kind of cut from place to place, and Jon, if you just look, if you were to draw a map and look at where Jon goes, he goes from the north to Dragonstone, back up to the Wall, back down to King's Landing, and then goes is now going back to Winterfell. You know, there are other characters that are just skipping around the continent, and there's not enough time in the season to just make it a little bit easier to watch. It feels very rushed, and for that, I think the season suffered a little bit. Not only that, the dialogue at points seemed a little bit contrived, a little bit stale. I think, looking at this scene right here, if we were to think about the last episode in the big, and of course, spoilers ahead. I did not say that yet, but spoilers will definitely be a part of this podcast. But in the last, the last episode, Peter Baelish, of course, gets killed, and that is a character that was probably one of the best parts of the show. Peter Baelish is probably one of the best written literary characters, at least in fantasy fiction, ever, I think. You know, you have characters who can be like schemers. If you think about Wormtongue in Lord of the Rings. But Peter Baelish wasn't just a completely different level of scheming. I mean, he schemed so much that he literally caused all of the events that happened in the show. So many of the events are caused by Peter. And for a character like that, who is so quietly important, to go out just kind of like in a quick minute, there's no foreshadowing to it. I mean, there is kind of. There's no real setup. It's just everyone knows what you did. Our psychic brother told us, Bran. And now we're just gonna slice your throat and kill you. They built it up throughout the entire season. They talked about the dagger, the cat's paw dagger, in like 4 episodes. They were just hyping up this dagger, and everyone knew that it was Baelish's dagger. So everyone was like, well, it seems like he's gonna be killed by it, and he was, but it wasn't in a cool way. It was in a very, again, rushed scene. I think he deserved a better exit. I think a standoff between him and Sansa. Maybe if, Sansa had an inner struggle with what she was doing. The fact that Baelish did save her life and did do all these things for her. And she had developed this long relationship with this guy. Maybe there was a part of her that respected him and what he did for her, Without Baelish, Jon would be dead again. So, of course, he's a bad guy. Sansa shouldn't like him. Nobody should like him. And she knows that, he did all these things because he loved her. And, as creepy as that might be, as off-putting as that might be, doesn't change the fact that he's still a guy with emotion who wants to do the right thing sometimes. He's just really bad at it. Because he's been a schemer his whole life. That's how he got to where he was. So, is he a good guy? No. But I think there should have been more of a struggle with Sansa. Ultimately, she would have made the decision to kill him. But if there was just more from her, rather than her going, well, Bran told us what you did, so there you go, we're gonna kill you. It's a little, I don't know, a little off-putting to me. So that's my Baelish thing. If we were to go into some other storylines, we can delve a little deeper into how I felt. So, I guess the biggest storyline, of course, is Jon and Daenerys. Now, these are two characters that have been the main protagonists throughout the story. Most people like both of these characters. They're pretty likable. They both have their flaws. I think Daenerys probably has a few more flaws than Jon. But at the same time, having them come together is huge. The name of the series is A Song of Ice and Fire. Jon is ice, Daenerys is fire. So, the series has been building up to this. This is where it all is going down. And I liked a lot of what they did with Daenerys and Jon. I thought their first interactions were very fitting. You know, kind of this awkward, we don't know each other, don't know if we can trust each other, but we do have things in common that we want, or we can kind of negotiate with each other, you know. And then, and then the storyline kind of got a little stale. You know, he brings Daenerys into the caves and shows her. You know, he's basically spending the season trying to convince her that the White Walkers are a bigger threat than Cersei. In the end, he succeeds, of course, at the with the sacrifice of one of Daenerys' dragons, but in the end, they come together. There's that scene, that love scene, where they're basically together now, and Tyrion is kind of leering and really looks worried about what's going to happen between them. So I think they're in trouble. I really do. The biggest question that I've heard other people talk about, and that I've been trying to consider, is it a good thing? Or does it make sense for these two characters to come together in like a romantic relationship? And I've come to an answer. And I think the answer is no. I think the relationship was forced. Of course, they both went through a lot. Maybe they're both looking for love, but I kind of like the idea that they would just be partners. And, maybe, who knows what George R.R. Martin will do when he releases the books. The last couple books, Maybe they won't be. They probably won't be in a love relationship. But I feel like the way it done wasn't really that well done. I think they're vastly different characters. In a lot of ways, I do think they are similar in a lot of ways too. But I don't see them having that connection at all. I think so. They're very different in kind of their personalities. I think Jon is a lot more like heroic, and I guess honorable, and Daenerys is heroic, but in a different sense, in that she is aggressive and fierce and a little crazy and a little obsessed in what she's doing, where Jon is not. He's always been kind of distant from what he does. And the honor side of him tells him that he needs to do what he's doing. He respects the world that he lives in. He respects life in general, and he knows that he has to defend, but he doesn't really want to do it. it's an honor, it's a duty for him. Whereas Daenerys, I think, has always wanted to prove her brother wrong. Viserys has wanted to, of course, take back her family name and give it, substance. But this whole journey that she's been on has been because of what other people have told her. That, the Targaryens are supposed to rule, and so she must pursue Westeros in order to take the crown back. And so she's just gone through a very different path from Jon. That's what's different about them. What's similar is that I think they both respect humanity in a very big way. And now that the season is over, they both have the same goal, which is to defeat the White Walkers. And I think you kind of have to go with the whole opposites attract thing with Ygritte, whereas Ygritte was very tomboyish, wasn't born of any power, anything like that, doesn't have an important name, isn't really, has no importance in the world at all. And I feel like Jon related to her a lot more because of that. But also Ygritte had this personality which was directly opposite of him and brought out something in him that he wasn't. He's a shy guy. He's a bastard. He's kind of the emo kid, who isn't really, doesn't have a great personality, is very serious, has been through a lot, doesn't really laugh that much. He's very solemn. And Ygritte brought in life, but Daenerys doesn't really have that like Ygritte did, so I don't think they're a good match. On the other side of that, she's also his aunt, so there's that. There was the big reveal that Rhaegar did marry Lyanna, which means that Jon is a legal Targaryen. He is the heir to the throne. So that was an interesting development. So I wasn't a big fan of their relationship in the end, but I did like a lot of their scenes together in general. I do think that the relationship is doomed. I think either one of them or both of them will die in the end. I think Jon has already died once. He's not meant for the land of the living. I don't see why they would bring him back to the dead and then have him be this kind of undead person just living out his life. I think he's gonna die again. I think Daenerys will probably die. But maybe they'll have a child, and the child will live on and do better, or continue their plan. So that's Jon and Daenerys. Hopefully that was a good little overview of their storyline. I'm actually going to skip some of these clips because we're still in episode 1. I don't know, there's a lot of clips here, so don't mind me. So let's see if, I don't know, we'll do episode 7. This really was the climax. I mean, the climax was also episode 6, but this was the best episode of the season, in my opinion. Some of the best dialogue is in this episode. The best scene in the entire season was by far, the scene where Tyrion goes to talk to Cersei. I mean, the emotion in that scene was so gripping, and that is classic Game of Thrones for me. Tyrion and Cersei battling it out, hating each other, but in the end, Tyrion does persuade Cersei to at least, fake agree to help them fight the White Walkers. In the end, Cersei betrays them, but the question is, what did Tyrion say to her in that bit of the conversation we don't see? What did he say to her to make her agree? I have a few theories, or I have some ideas. The first thing that I think he might have said is, if she helps them to fight the White Walkers, he will promise to let her baby be the next heir, basically, because she told him very shortly after they cut away that she was pregnant. He probably proposed to her that after they defeat the White Walkers, your baby will be the next in line, because that's what she wants. She wants power. She wants her family to have power. All of her other kids are gone, so he wants to make them the heir. That's what I think he probably said. He could have also said, after the war you get to kill me, or something like that. I don't know. Although, she had the chance to kill him right there and she didn't do it, so probably not the best theory out there, but it's a possibility. And I guess that can move us on to Cersei and Jaime storyline throughout the season. So Jaime, Cersei start out the season, they're alone. They need to bring some people together. The beginning of the season is them trying to rally some forces. So they get the Tarleys, they get some of the other Bannermen, they get the Greyjoys, at least the Greyjoys who are following Euron. So they have a navy, they have an army led by Jaime. They go attack Highgarden, they take Highgarden. They lose Casterly Rock, but it doesn't really matter. It's not what they wanted to do. And they destroyed all the Unsullied ships, basically. So Daenerys has no navy left. And it's all because of Jaime and Cersei outthinking Tyrion. They know their brother. They knew that he would probably try to go for Casterly Rock, and they kind of outmaneuvered him. I think their storyline was really good. But again, I think there's a lot missing from it. I would have liked to see some more progression. By the time that last scene with Jaime and Cersei came around, where he's, she says she's going to kill him, and then he finally says, I don't believe you, and he walks away, and he goes outside and it starts snowing. I think that was a really important scene, and I wish there had been a little bit more to lead up to it, so we could just get some build up. It just kind of popped out of nowhere. So Jaime and Cersei are officially over. I think he finally realized that she is not a good person, and it's not worth, risking all of this just for someone that you have loved your whole life. It's almost like he sacrifices love to do the right thing, and he knows the right thing is to go up north and to fight the White Walkers. He knows that's the right thing to do, and I think she does too, Cersei. But she doesn't care. Her life is not very valuable. At least she doesn't. I don't think she sees it as valuable. So, I'm curious to see where season 8 takes Jaime. To be honest, I think we'll see a lot of good stuff there. So I'm just adjusting my mic, so it might sound a little bit clearer now, hopefully. I think that's all I have to say about the Jaime Cersei thing right now. There may be something that I missed, but mainly I'm just curious to see what happens. You know, maybe Jaime will kill Cersei in the end. We'll see. I guess we can talk about Tyrion next. His kind of arc through the season. So he's just performing as Daenerys' advisor throughout the season. There's a bit of a rift between him and Daenerys, especially after he gets her entire navy destroyed. And Daenerys is now questioning Tyrion's allegiance. I think Tyrion himself is questioning his own allegiance. I think the fact that he betrayed his family, left, you know, was something that at the time he thought was right, but now that he's really getting into this situation, he's starting to doubt himself, I think, and maybe wonder if he's doing the right thing. You know, because he only went to Daenerys because he wanted revenge, basically. You know, and Varys kind of led him there, so we'll see. Overall, I think his character arc was pretty weak throughout the season. He makes a lot of mistakes. Daenerys shuts him down a lot. He's kind of being pushed aside, which I don't like, especially now that she's going to be with Jon. I think Tyrion is very worried about his position with Daenerys and Jon. I think that's the main reason he gave that worried look when they're, you know, making love in the bedroom and on the ship. I think because he knows that he's now out. She's just going to listen to Jon all the time, and she doesn't really. What use does Tyrion have? He's kind of a liability. The only reason that she had him there before was because she was fighting against Cersei. And now it's going to be very interesting once Daenerys' focus switches to the White Walkers. Tyrion all of a sudden offers no expertise. Tyrion knows Cersei. Tyrion knows King's Landing. He knows the Lannisters. He knows Westeros. He doesn't know the North. He doesn't know anything about the Wall. He doesn't know anything about the White Walkers. He didn't believe it. He made fun of Jon for believing in it in season 1. So Tyrion now has no use to Daenerys anymore. She's not fighting Cersei. Now, if maybe she goes, defeats the White Walkers, then wants to fight Cersei, that she might need Tyrion. But Tyrion knows that they're going in to fight a war that he has no purpose fighting. He's not a fighter. He's not a warrior. So his position is now extremely weakened by the presence of Jon, and by the reality of the war that they're fighting. So I think season 8 Tyrion is going to go through a lot. Probably a lot of negative things. Now, Tyrion's my favorite character. He's a lot of people's favorite character. I hope he lives in the end. And I hope that when all is said and done, season 8, is over, I hope that his character gets justice. At least his arc. I hope his arc gets justice. So that's what I think of Tyrion. Other kind of smaller storylines, Gendry and Davos. Well, not together, but, Gendry in particular coming back. I think that was not super necessary, actually. People were wondering where Gendry was this whole time, and they brought him back. I didn't really see the need for it. Unless they have big plans for him, which they might. Of course, he is, the kind of unofficial heir to the Baratheons. So there's that, but the Baratheons have been out of it for a while now. Technically, because Joffrey was a Lannister, Tommen, they were all Lannisters, really. So I don't see a reason to, they could have just killed off the Baratheons and left it at that. I think that would have been fine. But he's back. I think that was, honestly, like, when I saw that, I was like, yeah, it's cool to see Gendry again, but do they need it? Davos, I think, had little to no arc at all in the story. He's a great character, and this is another issue with this season. The focus is on the main characters right now only, and the side characters are getting pushed to the side more and more. Davos is an excellent character, and he didn't get much. The Hound did get some good stuff. He had that really interesting scene in the first episode. Goes out on the expedition in the north, so the Hound got some good stuff. I think Jorah coming back. I think Jorah did get some really good scenes. The whole grayscale thing was gross, but also really, I don't know. I thought that was really fitting for his character to kind of go through that and then return fully healed. When he's saved by Sam. Sam is another character that I'm confused why they kind of went through all this effort to get into Old Town, and now he's just going back. I guess he needed to go back at some point, but I just feel like the whole Old Town thing, there was so much set up, and then he just left with no real ending to that storyline. He just left, and there wasn't much conclusion there. He learned some, of course he learned a bunch of stuff there. But was Old Town really a fulfilling storyline? Not really. I did not feel it was fulfilling. But I do think Jorah coming back was cool. But again, right after he met Daenerys, it was like, alright, Jorah's here, cool, now let's push him to the side. Let him stand in the back of some scenes and give that, that stoic face he always gives and whatever. He has no use in the storyline right now. Varys as a character is now completely and utterly useless. He literally has like zero use. He just stands around in scenes a lot, doesn't have many lines, which is sad because I think Varys is one of my favorite characters. Season 1 Varys was amazing. Season 2 Varys was amazing. Once I got into like 5, 6, I started to not like the character as much. I thought that he was best in King's Landing. He was such a great schemer, but he was also, he didn't serve anyone, and he says that to Ned in the dungeons in Season 1. He doesn't serve anyone, he serves the realm. So you kind of get an insight to that character right away. Of course, they're always questioning what he wants, but I really think he just wants peace. He hates fighting. He hates to see people suffer. So, to have a character with that much depth, so much built into him in the earlier seasons, to be belittled into just a side character in Season 7 is really disappointing. So, you can kind of see my disappointment in a lot of the season. Now we can kind of talk about some of the action sequences. Now that we've gone over most of the characters, I think we could talk about, there's Arya Sansa. Before we go into the action sequences, we can talk about Arya and Sansa. This to me was the worst storyline in the season. It was horrible, and I don't want to make it seem like I hated the season, but I really did not like the storyline. The reason I really didn't like it was in the last season, in Season 6, there were building up this huge thing between Sansa and Jon. The fact that they didn't trust each other, and the fact that, Sansa, maybe she wants to be the queen of Winterfell and is trying to undermine Jon, is always fighting him on things, and, they don't really have a good relationship. They built all that up, and then in season 7, Jon leaves. Nothing happens between him and Sansa, really. Then Arya shows up, which is nice because the Starks are coming to Winterfell. That's nice. But Arya kind of just replaces Jon, and now Sansa and Arya are arguing instead. So it's like, what happened between Sansa and Jon? It's just a very strange storyline. And of course they kind of mirror back to season 1 a lot with the reunion of the Starks. And the whole thing was supposed to be that Arya was always a warrior, the tomboy, and Sansa was always the princess, the pretty one, the one who wanted to be a queen, all that kind of stuff. So they mirror that, and they bring it back to this storyline, which is a nice little addition. Kind of makes it a little believable, but at the same time, not believable at all. You would think that these two girls are sisters. Of course, they've been through a lot, but their family, they have been away from home for, I think, years, right? I don't know exactly how many years or what the timeline has been, but they've been through the ringer. Sansa spent a long time being tortured, a prisoner basically in King's Landing, getting tortured by Joffrey, mentally and psychologically tortured by Cersei. And now she finally finds one of her family members, her sister, who she's been probably missing for a long time, has been wanting to see her. They meet, and nothing. They just bicker again, and they just kind of fall back into this strange relationship. Now, in the end, they kind of, they bond, and they figure out that Peter Baelish is the one who, they should be angry at. But Arya's whole, kind of testing of Sansa is very strange. I didn't really think it was realistic at all. The fact that she's threatening her at the end and all that, I just didn't really buy it. I didn't really get that storyline very much. So I thought it was a pretty weak part of it. And not only that, but Baelish's plan to pit Sansa versus Arya didn't make much sense. Which is probably why he finally died, because he made mistakes. But he was another character that the show didn't need him anymore. He was useless. What do you do with a useless character? I guess you just kill him off. So they're rendering a lot of their characters to be useless, and I don't like that. But that is, again, just an after effect of the amount of time they would need to tell the full story. It's not a book. It's a 7-episode season. They don't have enough time to do everything. So I think that's the last storyline. Now the action sequences, as I promised. The action in this season, as I said, was spectacular. The best part. Some of the best action sequences in the entire show's history. I do think that the expedition north with the group of misfits, whatever you want to call them, you have the Hound, Jon, Tormund, Gendry, Beric Dondarrion, Thoros of Myr, and I think that might have been it. Jorah was there. That whole thing made no sense at all. The fact that they were going to get a single White Walker. I mean, or just white, whatever they're called. It didn't make much sense, but in the end, it was a way to get a cool scene up north, a cool battle. I honestly thought that the White Walkers were going to take down the wall in like episode 1 of season 7, but it took the whole season for them to do that, and I feel like that was a mistake. They probably should have knocked on the wall, started this whole war going already, and not just saved the war for season 8. But who knows? So the Expedition North, again, didn't make too much sense to go get a white to tell Cersei about it. You know, why would you go through all this effort to tell her about it when really do you even need Cersei to fight this war? You know, you really don't need her. You know, and I think that it just wasn't smart, you know, to risk Jon's life just to get this white that might maybe convince Cersei to join. You know, it was just strange. Anyways, the scene was really cool, and you know, there's now an undead dragon, which is very cool as well. It's verging on ridiculous, but you know, still, it's fun to watch. The thing about that sequence was, it was a little unbelievable. It was verging into like almost child fantasy stories, you know, where you have, you know, the White Walkers falling into the lake and all this, you know, stuff. It starts to get a little too ridiculous for Game of Thrones. I think that if you stick to making the White Walkers still have like human traits, in that, you know, if there's a battle between the undead and human soldiers, it's just like it still looks like a regular battle. You know, you don't want to add too much fantasy in there, because it'll start to look ridiculous and seem fake. So the undead dragon, while it's cool, takes away from the the realism that Game of Thrones often portrays, and it kind of walks this line of, yeah, this is fantasy, but it seems real a lot of the time, and that's due to, again, the complicated nature of the characters. The fact that George R. R. Martin used history, like actual history, to write these characters and to write these storylines. And so when you start getting too crazy with it, you lose that that sense of, you know, maybe this could happen kind of thing. So if I were to rate that whole episode, you know, usually every season the second to last episode is like a big battle. I would say it was probably one of the worst second to last episodes. The best second to last episode, in my opinion, was definitely Blackwater Bay. That episode was amazing, amazingly shot, very suspenseful, very cool. The other kind of big set piece was the Spoils of War battle, where you have Jaime and the Lannisters facing off against the Dothraki and the you know, Daenerys' dragon, Drogon, and that action sequence was really, really well done. And the reason it was well done is because you see their battle from the perspective of Jaime, right? Jaime's his character that, again, very deep, on the surface seems like an asshole, excuse my language, but on the surface, you know, is in love with his sister, who's crazy, is, you know, on the wrong side of the war, but we've seen parts of Jaime that make us really like him as a person, particularly his journey with Brienne in season 3. We learn a lot about him, and we see his humanity, and so think everyone in the show roots, or everyone who watches it, they want to root for Jaime. He's a very, very deep character. So to see Daenerys as the enemy coming in, the Dothraki horde, their thunderous, the thunderous noise they make with the horses storming in, the dragon comes up and burns everyone alive. It's disgusting. She looks like a war criminal. I heard someone say that it's almost like if you had a battle of knights, and all of a sudden a Black Hawk helicopter comes in and just rains missiles and machine guns on them. It's not fair. It's not humane. It's not like it's not a fair fight, and you're not just doing honorable battle, because that's what a lot of medieval warfare was kind of focused on, was honor, chivalry, one-on-one duels, fighting with a sword. And so to see people just kind of destroy, just burnt down and just, destroyed in such a cruel way, when you see it from the perspective of Jaime, it looks disgusting. And so you see the perils of war, and I think, there are a lot of movies, especially about, like, Vietnam, who portray violence, or portray war in a way that is off-putting, and kind of, makes your heart sink into your chest a little bit. It's like, this is not right. And I think that scene catches that same attitude of, this is not war, this is massacre, this is horrible. And so, at the end of the battle where there's, the ashes of, Jaime's soldiers, and he sees that spear, and he charges towards Daenerys. Trust, like, if you go and watch that again, I guarantee you, there will be maybe just a little part of you that really wants him to kill her. I remember when I first saw it, I was like, you know what, Jaime? I hope you do kill her. I hope he takes that spear and kills her, because she is the villain in that action sequence. She is not portrayed as a good character. For all the liberation she's done, all the thing that she did in Meereen, in the East, she's supposed to be this great figure. Now she's a war criminal, and she massacres people, doesn't battle them, but just wipes them out. So I kind of, in that respect, think that the dragons are doomed to die. I think all three of them will not make it out of the series, because they shouldn't be there. This is a series driven by politics, driven by characters, relationships, driven by reality history. And the fantasy, while it's fun, while it is a part of the story, the fantasy aspect of it is almost, it's almost like it doesn't belong. It's like the dragons are there and they're cool and you want to see them do stuff, but they're causing a lot of mayhem and they should probably die. So I loved that action sequence in Spoils 4. I love the dragons. I don't want to shame them at all, but I do think that they will die, all die eventually. One of them is already technically dead, of course. Now, I'm going to wrap up the podcast pretty soon. Before I do, there's one other thing I want to say about Season 7. And it mainly has to do with Tyrion, and this is how, kind of like the prediction section of the podcast. So, Tyrion, in one scene in particular, is talking to Daenerys, and they're trying to come up with a plan of you know, when she dies, what's going to happen? Who's going to be the heir? You know, who's going to lead and all this sort of stuff. And of course, there's that classic line from, I think, season 5, maybe 6. I think it's 5. Where she says, where Daenerys says to, she says it to someone, and then she eventually says it to Tyrion that she's not trying to rebuild the wheel, she wants to break the wheel, which basically means that she wants to take down the governmental system of Westeros. And that means like liberating the people. She thinks that the wheel basically represents the government, at least as I see it, or the systematic oppression. She wants to just get rid of it. So you start to think about what that means. That, you know, to her, that means that she will replace it, create a new type of dictator, or new type of monarch, who will be kind and loving, who will take care of the people and will not deceive them, and blah 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 blah. But Tyrion mentions to her that there are other ways to pick a leader, and he tells her about the Night's Watch and the fact that they elect their leader. You know, when you look back to when Jon was elected the Lord Commander, they did a vote, and Tyrion is basically referencing democracy. And so I think what will probably happen in season 8, maybe an open-ended thing, but I think eventually there will be the hint of a philosophical enlightenment, and maybe that the civilization in Westeros, or in the entire planet where Game of Thrones takes place, is moving towards democracy, or it will end on democracy once Cersei is dead. Maybe Daenerys is dead. Maybe it will lead into democracy. And the reason I think this is because, again, the show references history. If you look at a map, Westeros looks just like Great Britain. The wall represents an actual wall that separated Scotland and England. There are many, many connections between history and the show, and so I think the show is trying to connect the dots between the medieval era and maybe the classical era or the Enlightenment. And honestly, when I was talking about Old Town and Sam, I really thought that Old Town was going to be very important to the story, because I thought Old Town was going to be the beginning of a certain maybe scientific or philosophical enlightenment. You know, it's the center for science, for critical thinking, and that maybe the show was going to hint that they were moving out of the Dark Ages, out of medieval time, into a enlightenment period, which was focused more on reason, skepticism, philosophy, math, you know, these kind of core modern values that we have, these modern ideas. And that's kind of what I hope the show will end on. You know, there's been all these battles, you know, all these wars, but, you know, and the last book is called A Dream of Spring, which to me means that, you know, at the end of the series, we'll be turning a new page, and we'll be maybe moving towards something better, right? And that's what I expect. So I'm not going to do specific predictions for characters besides what I've already said, but those are my kind of big picture predictions for season 8 and the end of the story, end of this series. So if you like Game of Thrones as much as I do, please leave a like on this video, subscribe if you would like to. Thank you very much for watching, and again, I like the season a lot. Hopefully I've explained why, you know, some of my issues with it, and I would love to hear what you guys think about the season as well, and maybe some of your hopes for season 8. So Thank you very much for watching. Hope you have a great night.